A quick question. Can I have a volunteer to record this? Are you recording it? Fantastic, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you for a wonderful welcome. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you all for coming along this evening. I've been here since Friday. It's fantastic. Long Island is beautiful. New York is amazing, the most exciting city. And I'm a London lover, and I've still got to say that. I hope that doesn't offend. Fantastic place. Thank you all so very much. And you're all such warm, welcoming people. And I'm really very grateful, and I'm really very touched, and I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. What I wanted to talk about this evening was the threat to Western civilization, and I will do that. But first of all, I want to tell you a little something about myself, and in telling you a little something about myself, I will be telling you about the threat to Western civilization. My name is Anne-Marie Waters. I am the leader of a political party in the United Kingdom. I'm the leader of a political party in what's left of the United Kingdom. It is not the United Kingdom that it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even 2 or 3 years ago. The rapid transformation of the UK is quite shocking. And I don't think many people quite understand the transformation and how serious this transformation is. It has ramifications, it has repercussions. For all of us in the West and for all of us who want to live in a free, civilized society. I started out, I don't quite know how I ended up here, to be very honest. I started out trying to be a lawyer. I went to law school, I did my law degree, I did my postgraduate studies, and just around the time that I was about to start practicing law, I became persona non grata. I became a non-person. I was unpersoned. As someone mentioned, Orwellian. We are living in an Orwellian UK. And you can be unpersoned. You are no longer, people won't speak to you anymore. You can forget about finding a job. You can forget about any access to the media or to any platform in which to give your, any mainstream platform in which to make your arguments. You are unpersoned. You become a nobody. And I became that person just as I was about to start practicing law. And the reason for that is because I started telling the truth. And I desperately wanted to tell the truth. And when I was a law student, I discovered that we had Sharia courts in the United Kingdom. And you can say that to people now and they look at you with a little bit of, come on, you can't have Sharia courts in the UK. We do have Sharia courts in the UK. And we're not talking about underground Sharia courts. We're not talking about in someone's basement somewhere. These things are advertised. They have big signs outside saying Sharia Council. They are ruling on matters involving family law primarily, which is divorce, child custody, and domestic violence, which is also a criminal law matter. What they are doing is completely and entirely unlawful. They should not be doing this. And if you happen to get an MP or some senior politician who will answer a question on this, you won't, generally speaking, but if you happen to embarrass one into addressing it, they will tell you that these places have no legal clout, and the people who go to them are volunteers, and this is all therefore A-OK. No, it's not. It's not A-OK at all. First of all, they operate accordance with a system completely at odds with British law, completely the opposite of British law. They have British law, for example, on child custody matters. The child is always the primary concern. The court always takes the child as the primary concern. And any decision on that child is made with the best interests of the child at heart. That's British law. In Sharia law, the child belongs to the father, and he can take her or him away from the mother at any time over the age of 7. And the mother has no further rights. And it doesn't matter if the father is violent or abusive, this is how it is. We can also have 3 strikes divorces, where a man tells a wife, I divorce you 3 times, and then she's out on the street, she has no financial support, she has nothing. There's also, even more serious than that, is the domestic violence aspect of it. And we know We know that Sharia courts send women back into extremely violent marriages. And we know that the police, the British police, send women to Sharia councils to have their cases heard there. It is all completely against the law, and it happens with absolute impunity. I can say, I'm going to make a statement now that is true, 100% true. It's a controversial statement, but it's 100% true. And that is that Muslims in the UK are above the law. Completely and entirely above the law. It doesn't matter what crime they commit, the law is not applied. They do whatever they like, and the police look the other way. Now, there was for a long time this argument that you could, it's their culture. Let's not cause any trouble. Let's just leave them to it. Let them get on with it. So you have horrific crimes being committed, crimes like child marriage, or FGM, female genital mutilation, which we have thousands of cases, tens of thousands of cases in the UK. We have 8 hospital units in London alone dedicated to the medical aftermath of FGM. 8 in London alone. And London is not the FGM capital of the UK. That honour falls to Birmingham, which has a massive, massive Muslim population. But even if you're going to go down that road, even if you're going to say, well, it's their culture, leave them be, but that's not what's happening. Their culture is being imposed on all of us, and crimes against all of us are being committed. And it's not just terrorism. And I know you wince at me saying just terrorism, but we have terrible, terrible crimes committed against native British people by Muslim immigrants, and nothing is done about it. Some of you will have heard of Rotherham. Rotherham is a town in Yorkshire, and Yorkshire is synonymous in England with beautiful countryside and farming and traditional, rural Britain. That's what springs to mind when someone says Yorkshire. It's a rural county. They call it God's own country. It is stunningly beautiful. And Rotherham is a town in Yorkshire. And for decades, young girls were being gang raped in Rotherham by gangs of Muslim men. And it finally, after years of this, the government ordered an investigation into what was going on in this town. An investigation was carried out, and a conclusion was that at least 1,400 girls in this town had been gang raped by Muslims over the space of about a decade. 1,400 girls. We're not talking about a big city here either. We're not talking about a big city. And that was a Conservative estimate. Within this J report, the J report was the name of the investigation, the conclusion of the investigation into what was happening in Rotherham. Read it. Read it. It is shocking, and people just don't believe you. It's hard to believe. But let me just give you a couple of examples. And this when the Rotherham story broke, it was probably the biggest scandal that I can remember in the UK. It was absolutely huge. It was everywhere, all over the media for weeks and weeks. It was a huge, huge scandal. But let me just give you a few things that were mentioned in the J report. So this is an official government report. It's not it's not a sensationalist tabloid media. This is in an official government report. Young girls, drunk out of their minds, 13, 14 years old, drunk out of their minds, with gangs of Muslim men, seen by the police with gangs of Muslim men, and left with them. The police found a gang of Muslim men with a 14-year-old girl in a grotty flat above a takeaway, and they left her there with those men. One father tried to rescue his daughter, and the police arrested the father. We had a young girl herself was arrested for being drunk and disorderly when she tried to report that she was being raped. This is real. This really happened. And even after the massive, massive scandal and a few prosecutions, not even 1% of the rapists, but a few prosecutions were held. And even after all of this, I know a whistleblower, a wonderful lady. She received an OBE, which is a sort of an honour from the Queen, for her work in this area. She was a whistleblower in Rotherham. And I met her not so long ago. And she told me very clearly that not only is it still going on in Rotherham, but it's worse. It's worse now than it ever has been. And the police are still looking away, and the police are still doing nothing. Of course, we also have our terror attacks. But what my book is about, and the reason I called it Beyond Terror, is because it isn't terrorism that is going to destroy Western civilization. We can't be beaten militarily by Islam. They will beat us by coming into our society and imposing their culture. By stealth, slowly but surely, they are turning us and you into an Islamic state. And something worries me sometimes about America. I don't believe that America quite realizes that it is on the same path as Europe. There's a chapter in my book about America, and I urge you to read it, not just because it's my book, but I urge you to read it because I did a lot of research into what's going on in America. And it's the same. You have all the same things. You have got a massive immigrant Muslim population, which has joined up with the extreme left. And the extreme left, by the way, never went away. It didn't go away when the wall fell in Berlin. It didn't suddenly go away. It simply changed tack. It started the long walk through the institutions, taking over the public sector. That's what it's doing here, and that's what it's doing all over Europe. It's injecting itself into the public sector. It is injecting this political correctness, identity politics into policing. Policing in Britain is not one law for all. It is not the equal application of the criminal law or any other kind of law. It is one law for the rest of us and one law for Muslims. And I can give you an example of that as well. We have, as you know, rapists all over the country, nothing happens to them. One chap, famous example, a man put a bit of bacon outside a mosque. He was jailed and he died in prison under mysterious circumstances. No answers have yet been given as to how or why he died in prison for leaving bacon outside a mosque. But you can mutilate little girls, you can rape girls all over the country in organised gangs, you can traffic young girls around the country for rape, and nothing happens to you. We've had film, documentary evidence, undercover reporters going into mosques, finding them agreeing to forcefully marry underage girls. Guess what happened? Nothing. But you leave some bacon outside a mosque, you can expect a jail term. People have been arrested for putting Islamophobic posts on Facebook. It is extremely, extremely serious. And why is it happening? It's happening for two words that the biggest threat to Western civilization can be summed up in two words: mass immigration. We cannot maintain the democracies that we have built if we open our doors to millions and millions of people who don't believe in democracy. The United States is a melting pot. It is a nation in many ways of immigration. But I was in New York on Saturday, and I went to see the Statue of Liberty. And it's a reminder of what this country was all about. And when immigrants arrived into New York, this was what they saw. It was a reminder. You are coming here to America, and America is a free country. You may live here, but you must remember and you must accept that America is a free country. This is no longer the case. You no longer have that demand. We don't have it in Europe either. In fact, when people emigrate to Europe, we tell them not to become like us. We tell them not to integrate. We have this hideous, sinister thing called multiculturalism. It is one of the worst things that Britain has done to itself. Full stop. It is one of the worst things that Britain has done to itself. We have a completely fractured, divided country. We have ghettos. There's a town called Dewsbury, and it's also in Yorkshire. Poor old Yorkshire really does get the butt of a lot of the Islam problems. Which is extraordinary when you think about it, because as I explained to you, we know it as a rural farming, and now it's a hotbed of jihad. It's crazy. But there's a town called Dewsbury in Yorkshire. It is above 90% Muslim. All of the British effectively have gone. London is now minority English. Birmingham, our second biggest city, is minority English. And when this happens, when we were told that London is now a minority English city, what do you think the government did? They celebrated. This is wonderful. Finally, the whites are outnumbered in London. Finally. Isn't it great? How diverse. And you'll find diversity is Islam. That's what diversity means. You can have a school in East London, for example, and every child in it is Muslim and wearing a hijab. They call this diversity. There's no diversity here. Diversity simply means getting rid of the natives. You have situations, we have job applications not open to white people. The white natives not allowed to apply for jobs. And in one instance, this one is shocking to me, absolutely shocking. English Heritage. It's an organisation dedicated to, you guessed it, English heritage. It has museums and various. You get the idea. Looking for staff. Guess who was excluded from job applications? The English. English people need not apply for a job in English heritage. And this was done without any sense of irony, without any sense. No one was laughing. And you have this. You think, well, is this real? It's gone so mad that it's one of those situations where you look around you and you think, can everyone else see this? Is this me? Who's mad here? Who is mad here? We have police who are going out on these gay pride things, wearing bee outfits. What is going on? What is going on? We had this display by the police wearing high heels and coloured nail varnish. And they went through the streets with this dancing in the streets. We have them joining in protests, police joining in protests. So showing their political favour. There was a time when and I remember it, and I'm not that old. There was a time when the police took pride in being unbiased. That was the point of it. They went along and dispassionately protected protests. Now they join in the protests, and they will facilitate attacks on protests they don't like. Now, you may think that's an exaggeration. It isn't. You will know, of course, of a chap called Tommy Robinson. I know Tommy quite well. He stood as an independent MEP. MEP is a member of European Parliament. And during his campaign, he went to a specific town, Oldham, near Manchester, and he had a rally there. And the so-called Muslim Defence League, a rabble of protagonists, Muslim troublemakers, were guided to this protest by the police. The police walked them along in order to assault and attack Tommy Robinson's rally. If you think I'm exaggerating, it's all on YouTube. You can see it. You can see these people throwing objects, throwing bottles, throwing rocks, while the police are guiding them. That is how bad it is. The police are completely brainwashed into all of this, completely. I sometimes look at them and wonder to myself, what are they thinking? But you get the impression they're not thinking very much. There's an inevitability about it. That if you say anything bad about Islam, if you say anything bad about mass immigration, you're a racist and a Nazi and a fascist. To just step back a little bit, I started out my life, as I said, wanting to be a lawyer, trying to be a lawyer. I discovered Sharia law and I spoke out about it. I joined an organisation called One Law for All. And eventually I left that because they weren't willing to talk about mass immigration. I was a member of I was on the board of directors of the National Secular Society, which I used to look after issues involving Islam. I left that because they wouldn't talk about mass immigration. I used to be a member of the Labour Party. I used to be a Democrat. And I have obviously completely crossed the floor now. But for years I was an activist in the Labour Party. I left that because it was going crazy, first of all. You could see that the extreme left was rising in the Labour Party, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But I left also because I had tried to speak out about the horrors, particularly being committed against girls and women in the UK by Muslims. And so-called feminists went for me, went for the jugular. I was in the national press suddenly being called a Nazi and a fascist. And this is how I became unpersoned. I then joined UKIP, the UK Independence Party, which was led by Nigel Farage, which I'm sure many of you have heard of as well. I wanted desperately to talk about these issues. I wanted to say what I was seeing. I wanted to say that the country I loved was being torn apart by an alliance of the extreme left, which is growing in power, and Islam. And they were determined, and they are determined, and make no mistake about it, the ultimate aim is to bring down capitalism. Both Muslims and leftists are anti-capitalism. They don't want capitalist societies. They want to bring it down. They want to reduce it to rubble, and then they want to reign over the wreck. That is what they want. They want chaos and madness in our society. They are warping just about everything. Everything is turned on its head. The police are no longer police. We have the armed forces. The armed forces are advertising for recruits by showing a bowing Muslim. It's everywhere. It's relentless. All of the meat in the public services is halal, whether you like it or not. Even kids, even schools which have no Muslim children in them, the meat is still halal. We are being forced, this culture is being forced upon us. And do not protest. You can't protest about this stuff. You'll be a Nazi. And you can't, if you protest on animal welfare grounds, because we have animal welfare laws in Britain, which mean that the animal is supposed to be stunned, unconscious before its throat is cut. Completely ignored. The law means nothing at all. It's illegal to privately slaughter an animal. It's happening all over the UK. As we know, this bloodbath, Eid, is taking place. And animals will be being slaughtered all over the UK in back gardens, and it's completely illegal and nothing whatsoever will be done about it. We are handing our civilization away to the left and to Muslims. They are winning. They are winning. They have a lot of power. They have also taken education, and this is the big one. And this is the one where America is in just as big a mess as we are. And you really need to understand this. Because I see a lot, I interact a lot with Americans on social media, for example. And one of the most common things I hear is, God, we don't want to end up like Europe. And this worries me, because you already are like Europe. And Donald Trump can hold it at bay for a while. But you, like us, need a complete cultural shift in the institutions, in the education institutions primarily, because this is where people are shaped. And you have exactly the same problems here. Look at the universities. I'm pretty much banned from every university in the UK. I'm not allowed to speak. If on the occasion when I am asked to speak, Antifa threatens to destroy it, and it's cancelled. I've been asked to speak a couple of times. You would think I was Adolf Hitler. It's the hysteria. Talk about Trump derangement syndrome. It's the same, similar thing. They go absolutely crazy. Anyone would think I turned up with a machine gun to these things. All I'm doing is speaking, but they go crazy. They threaten to disrupt. They threaten violence, and I'm cancelled. And this happens with many of us. The universities are absolute hotbeds of neo-Marxism, of communism, and if you're not a neo-Marxist or a communist or a socialist, you won't work at a British university. They simply won't employ you. Schools are the same. Schools it's mind-blowing what is being taught in schools. Absolutely mind-blowing. Children are taken to mosques, needless to say. You will see photographs, nauseating, disgusting photographs of children bowing down in mosques. If a parent protests, then the parent is accused of, guess what? Racism. And racism is so very serious and important that an accusation alone can ruin your life. Accusation is proof. If you're accused of racism, no one wants to touch you. No one wants to talk to you. And nobody sits you down and says, listen, let's hear your side of the story. Why were you accused? Never happens. I've been called a neo-fascist, a Nazi, a racist in the national press. No one ever phones me from those newspapers and says, what is your response to this? Ever. I went to see a defamation solicitor. I was essentially told, I was asked, have you got £100,000 in your back pocket? I said, no, I don't. He said, do you want these big, powerful newspapers rummaging through your entire life and your family's life? No, I don't. Well, then if I were you, I'd drop it. You can't even be defamed by them because they don't consider you good enough to be defamed. So you have to be, defamation, you have to be lowered. Your reputation has to be lowered in the eyes of your peers. That's what defamation is. But if you're already a neo-Nazi and a racist, then your reputation can't get any lower. So once you've been labelled that, that's it. You are game. They can utterly, utterly destroy you. And they try to. So in UKIP, I really wanted to talk about this. I asked them over and over again, just let me set up a group called UKIP Against Sharia. Just let me go around to the branches and talk about Sharia law. That's all I want to do. They said, UKIP, UK Independence Party, again, this is the one used to be led by Nigel Farage. They wouldn't allow me to do this. So I had been a parliamentary candidate for UKIP. And in the 2017 general election, I stood as a parliamentary candidate again for UKIP for a day. One day, I was a candidate in that election. The leader of the party at that time was Paul Nuttall. The day after I was selected by the local party to be their candidate, he deselected me. He never told me, he still hasn't told me, I read about it in the paper. I was deselected because of what I say about Islam. And with that, I was so angry, just so angry. I thought, that's it. I'm going to challenge this guy for the leadership of UKIP. That was my plan. And I was going to do it. But he completely blew it with the general election and he resigned. And so a leadership election was called. I put my name forward. It was the most grueling campaign. It went on for months. And there were about 8 or 9 candidates, and every one of them were against me. They teamed up against me. Literally, they formed a little alliance against me. We would sit on the stage at hustings and they would all get their little digs in against me. So I came second in the end. And a pretty good result, actually. I was really pleased with it. I was pleased not to have won because it would have been completely untenable to lead a party where half of them were completely against me. But I did get a good result. And during the campaign, Nigel Farage and many others went to the national press and told them that I was a Nazi and a racist and a fascist. Now, this coming from Nigel Farage is serious because he is seen as Mr. Politically Incorrect in the UK. So if he says it, people take it really seriously. And still to this day, Antifa and the other thugs, mindless thugs, still to this day, they'll say she was kicked out of UKIP for being too racist. And that is all because of Nigel Farage. Farage, by the way, is still doing this. He is still smearing anyone who says anything negative about Islam. And loving his new life in the mainstream media because of it. That's the reason. They've let him in. He used to be a hate figure himself, but they have let him in on the proviso that he attacks the rest of us and keeps us out. So after that, I decided I am not doing this anymore. I am not going to ask other leaders to let me speak. I am going to be my own leader. So I formed my own political party a year and a half ago. I formed my own political party about a year and a half ago, and to my great delight, we have been trashing UKIP at the ballot box since. Trashing them. It is extremely difficult to break into politics. It's a little bit like wanting to become a Hollywood actor. It's just extremely, extremely difficult. Unless you have the connections, it's extremely difficult. But it's even more difficult when you are as demonised as we are. And I have refused, point blank, time and time again, to pretend. I will not pretend. We are told that the problem is Islamism. You go to a Muslim country and tell them about Islamism, they won't know what you're talking about. It's not Islamism, it's Islam. Islamism is a Western invention to cover up the realities of it. And even though we're covering up these realities, they're still seeing. We are relentlessly soaked in nonsense about this religion. Religion of peace, religion of peace, religion of peace. We know better. We know that's not the case. And recently, a statistic showed that 50% of British people believe Islam is a threat to our way of life. Now, if 50% can believe that in the midst of a barrage of lies and rubbish, then there is hope. There is hope. And there is also hope with the fact that no matter what the press have said and done about my small fledgling party, we are still getting great results at the ballot box. And we are beating parties that are decades and decades old. And I am extremely, extremely proud of that. So the threat to Western civilization takes many, many fronts. It is largely, I said we can sum it up with mass immigration, and I do believe we can. The US Constitution is the most important document in the world. It is the light of liberty in the world. And it is being chipped away at a left wing who see it as a white man's charter. And you can already see this happening. They want the Constitution gone. They want liberties gone. And what they are doing to aid this, and it's the same in Europe, is encouraging mass immigration from societies which resent America. It's the same thing that's happening with Britain. You have countries that have been to war, that Britain has been at war with, or been in a military presence. There's a real resentment against Britain. And mass immigration is coming from the countries with huge resentments towards Britain. They come believing they are owed something. Britain once colonised us, therefore I am owed by Britain and I am coming to collect. There's massive benefit bill. We have hundreds of thousands of people who have their entire lives paid for by the taxpayer. We have polygamous families paid for by the taxpayer. We have criminals paid for by the taxpayer. We have violent gangs paid for by the taxpayer. And the taxpayer is just getting more and more strain put on them. It's also the normal everyday Brit has been so disempowered, feels so disempowered. This is one of the biggest problems we've got. And when we went out in June 2016 and voted to leave the European Union, and nothing happened, and we're still not out of the European Union, what lesson have people learned? That they have no power. They do have power. And part of what we have to do, and part of what my party aims to do, is restore that sense of power to the British people, because it's been taken from them. For decades now, Britain has been told by its own leaders, by its police, by its judiciary, by its health service, the entire spectrum, that there is something wrong with Britain, that Britain should apologise for its past, its present, its future, just apologise for existing. This guilt is then, we bring in immigrants already with a resentment towards Britain. The British people are made to feel, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Tax, 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 tax. They have no money left. They are overworked, undereducated and downtrodden. And into this mix comes people who hate us, who want the country destroyed, and the loony left is standing applauding all of this. It is serious. It's an enormous, enormous threat, and we have got to stop mass immigration from countries that hate us. You would think that you wouldn't need to say that. I mean, is it necessary for me to say we have to stop immigration from countries that hate us? But apparently it is. And not only is it necessary, it's controversial. That we should be taking people who hate us because we owe them. We owe them. And the poor downtrodden British taxpayer owes them. And when a white British girl is gang raped in the back of a taxi, well, we did colonise their country, you know. It's only fair. This is the attitude. This is the attitude, and it's the same here. You cannot open up the borders of this country to people who resent you, to people who hate you, and to people who will not agree to abide by the Constitution. They don't want that Constitution. They want to bring it down. And you're crazy if you think you can keep America, America, if you open up to millions of people who hate America. It won't work. You're going to lose it. You're going to lose America. And I can tell you, if we lose America, then the lights go out all over the Western world. So please, please don't let us lose America. But we have serious problems in the school system, we have serious problems with police, and we have serious problems even across healthcare, everything. But we also have a serious problem, probably the most serious problem, is the lack of clarity. Our people are confused, unbelievably, indescribably confused. Let me explain what I mean by that. We have laws in Britain, for example, that protect children from abuse. Then we have FGM and nothing happens. People are confused. Who are we? Do we protect children from abuse or don't we? Who are we? But what we're told then, implicitly and explicitly, is we protect some children, we don't protect other children. So people become confused. What are our morals? Are we against child abuse or aren't we? Do we have a society of law and order or don't we? And if we do, then why aren't you applying it to them like you're applying it to us? People are confused. There's no leadership. There's no clarity. There's no morals. There are no morals. And what's worse, the most serious part of it all, there is no truth. We have become a completely subjective society. If I believe it, then it's true. Regardless of what's objectively true, if I say it's true, then it's true. It's true for me. And we have become this society, it's all about feelings. Well, some people's feelings. The young victim of a gang rape, her feelings, not so much. But if you have a transsexual, for example, their feelings are more important than anything else in the world. So we have this feelings society. We have a society where young children are taught at school about fetishes, about sexual fetishes. And I'm not kidding about that either. I'm not kidding about that. I saw a photograph just today of police walking fetish, people who dress up as dogs as a fetish. Police walking them. Police in uniform walking these people dressed up as dogs in this leather fetishy thing. We're teaching this to kids at school. I'm not kidding. This is it's dismantling decency. It's dismantling privacy. It's dismantling all that is good. It is confusing the hell out of everyone. You can now describe yourself, a man can describe himself as a woman and walk into a woman's dressing room. Nobody knows who we are. Nobody knows what the hell's going on anymore. It's chaos, utter chaos. And it's the left. It's a subversive left that is just dominating everything, that is telling us that Britain deserves to die and it's going to kill it. And it's going to bring in people from outside who hate it to help them kill it. We have got to stop this. And it is happening all over Europe. The good news is, and I am an optimist, I am a natural optimist, despite all of what I've just said, I am actually an optimist. And I do believe that we will turn this around. And the reason I believe it is because I know that most people out there agree with me. I know it. I know it. I know it from observation. I know it just from talking to people in general life. I know it from reading comments on newspapers. You know, you read below the line, the comments on an internet article. I always read them. Always. Because that's where that's where you find out what's really going on, is the public comments. And that's why newspapers have started getting rid of public comments. They have. I remember an article about me in a tabloid over there, and there were 10 comments left, and all 10 were supportive of me. Guess what happened? Comments were taken down. Now there are no comments at all on these stories. But that's where you look. That's where you know. There was a brilliant study done a few years ago by an organisation called Examine Islam. And they went through a year's worth of below-the-line comments on any story involving Islam. And they found The Guardian and the Daily Mail. I don't know how well you know the British press, but The Guardian is over there on the absolute loony fringe left. It's a parody. It's a parody. It's become a parody of itself. It's actually an expression, never go Guardian. It's completely lunatic. And on the other side, you have this old school conservative newspaper called the Daily Mail. And those two are sort of synonymous. If you want to explain left and right papers, you say Guardian or Daily Mail. It's synonymous. People know exactly what you're trying to say. They found that the percentage was above 90 negative comments about Islam below the line in the Guardian and in the Daily Mail. They were both above 90% of the comments were negative about Islam on both the left and on the right. I know that people get this. I really do. I know that parents are thinking, what are you telling my kid at school? What's going on? We have a 2,000% increase over a year of children referring themselves to gender dysphoria clinics. 2,000% increase. Teachers in schools are teaching kids this. They're encouraging them. And they say they're doing it in the name of fighting gender stereotypes. They're enshrining gender stereotypes. If a little girl likes to play football, she's really a boy in a girl's body. This is what kids are being told. Parents notice this. People are noticing this. And this is good, because the more they notice that the truth is being taken away from us. The truth and objectivity, objective language is being taken away from us. You don't have to be a woman to be a woman. Anyone can be a woman. No, you have to be a woman to be a woman. That's it. You have to be a man to be a man. It's quite simple. And this is very fundamental. There's a reason I'm mentioning this trans thing quite as much as I am, because it's fundamentally untrue that a man can become a woman and a woman can become a man. Everyone knows that's not true. But we are being told it is. It is like 1984. When Winston Smith is told 2 and 2 is 5, 2 and 2 is 5, 2 and 2 is 5. No, it's not. It's 4. And he insisted that it was 4. At least in his own mind, he insisted that it was 4. But this is where we are. People, however, do know this. They do know this. We have a poisonous, toxic media which frightens them. I think the majority of people are frightened. They're too afraid to say how they really think. That's Britain today. The majority are afraid to say what they really think. They're afraid to say what they think about Islam, about immigration, about this trans thing, about absolutely anything that's remotely controversial. And they're right to be, because people are being arrested and jailed for speaking. A teacher, a school teacher, and again, I'm going to just say a few more things about this trans thing, because it's such a big issue, and it's one that will get you arrested in a heartbeat. A teacher in school called a child she when the child wanted to be called he, or vice versa. And the police came. Now, remember this, we can't get the police to go out and arrest known rapists. I spoke to a girl. I spent a couple of years investigating rape gangs, Muslim rape gangs across the UK, and I spoke to many women who had been victims of these gangs. And one of them took me to a train station in the city that she lived in, and the taxis were lined up outside the train station, and we stood, and she said, he's one, he's one, he's one, he's one. I said, what? She said, I went to the police. I know who they are. I went to the police, I gave them their names, their addresses, and the car registration numbers, and told them, these men are raping girls all over this town. Not one of those men ever had a knock on the door from the police. None. But, though we can't do anything about it, and you'll always hear from the left, because even they won't openly say we shouldn't be going after rape gangs. I mean, they'll pretend they care. But they'll say it's about resources. We don't have the resources for it. The police are underfunded. It's conservative cuts to the public sector. The police just don't have the time, the resources, the manpower to look after these things. But they do have the time and the resources to sit on Twitter all day and police what we are saying. I was banned from Twitter for criticising the police. But you will see tweets coming out from police telling us that watch what you say on here. I remember they put out one with those little emojis of the computer, and then a little two eyes looking at the computer. This is what came from the police. We're watching you. Be careful. Be careful what you say on social media. We're watching you. That's our police. And they will turn up to a school where the teacher misgenders the child. They will turn up to the school. And that teacher was told that she had committed a hate crime. We had 2 women arrested over one incident. Also, they were on Twitter. They called a man, a woman, you get misgendering. Or in fact, accurately gendering is the real description. And they were both arrested and spent time in a prison cell because they said something on Twitter that wasn't trans-friendly. This is crazy. And it's not a quirky little thing that we can simply laugh at and ignore. It is the complete transformation of what was once a free and democratic country. I mean, your own constitution, much of it comes out of England. Much of it is inspired by principles coming out of England. England is the parent of a lot of liberal concepts all over this world. In fact, so much so that people don't even recognise them as English. They're so standard, trial by jury. Does people realise that that's an English... Now look at it. Now look at it. It's depressing. It's enough, it's the powerlessness that you feel when such a great country and such a beacon of freedom for centuries and centuries is now reduced to arresting teachers for calling a child a boy and not a girl. This is where we are. This is our current situation. This is our police. And our governments are time after time after time. It doesn't matter whether it's Labour or Conservative, they are right up there with the political correctness. And it's not going to change with Boris Johnson. I know that Boris Johnson is seen as a great hope. Even people on my side, people like Katie Hopkins. And I've got to say, Katie, I love you, but Boris is not this great hope. In his first days, he said we must get rid of Theresa May's immigration targets. I mean, Theresa May, he is tough on immigration compared to Boris Johnson. In his first days, she said that she was going to reduce immigration to tens of thousands per year. We're currently on about 300,000 a year into a country of 65 million. It's a city almost the size of Birmingham, our second biggest city, every single year. And you can see it. The hospitals are packed. The clinic, I went to an NHS clinic for the first time in a long time, about a year and a half ago. Couldn't believe what I was seeing. NHS is our National Health Service. It's free healthcare for everyone. Could not believe what I was seeing. It was like the third world. You can walk through many streets in Britain now, and it is like walking through the third world. It is being dismantled. And this is because 300,000 are coming in every year. And this is under Labour and under the Conservatives. And Theresa May said she was going to bring it down. We must aim to bring it down to tens of thousands. Boris Johnson gets in. Day one, I'm getting rid of her target. Let's have unlimited immigration. That's what he said. He also wants to give amnesty to illegal immigrants. And he has been banging on about this for quite some time. When he was Foreign Secretary, he sent a message out, we must give amnesty to illegal immigrants. This was around the time, or not long after, Angela Merkel had opened up, not Germany's border, Europe's border, to half the world. And not long afterwards, Boris Johnson was saying we have to give amnesty to illegal immigrants. What message does that send? Our Foreign Secretary was telling the world, come to Britain, all you have to do is get here and we will let you stay here and we will give you a house and we will pay for your education. And by the way, you will go to the top of the queue ahead of the British. And that's not something they're embarrassed about either. We have had judges rule in court that immigrants and refugees should take precedence over British people in terms of hospital treatments, in terms of school places. Immigrants should be ahead of the queue in front of the British. This is where we are. And no wonder, is it any wonder the British people feel so downtrodden? It's a scandal.
It sounds like
and
America.
You're feeling, it does.
Yeah,
do you know, I was just about to say that. Literally just about to say that. It's happening to you as well. Americans are also being told to be sorry, to feel guilty, to apologise for existing. Don't ever apologise for being America. Please don't ever apologise. I am very, very strongly pro-America. I have always been very strongly pro-America, and I am very strongly pro the UK's special relationship with America. And I'm fully aware that the European Union is doing its damnedest to wreck that relationship. A European army is on its way. It is on its way. And Emmanuel Macron, who can always be depended upon to put his foot in his mouth, but in doing so, to give the game away, he's about as tactful as a sledgehammer, this guy. He said, making it very clear, on the European army, he said very clearly that the United States was a potential enemy that Europe needed protection from. This European army is designed to undermine NATO and to destroy the relationship between Europe, particularly Britain, and the United States. They are doing their utmost because Europe is governed by people who hate America. It's not the people don't hate America, the leaders hate America. And the anti-America message seeps through the media at all levels. It's anti-America. And I can tell you, I have never in my lifetime seen a US president treated by the British press the way Donald Trump is treated by the British press. It is disgraceful. Utterly, utterly disgraceful. They mock him, they ridicule him, and I'm not talking about fringe papers, I'm talking about the BBC's most senior presenters. They mock and ridicule him. They are so biased against him that they don't have any idea. They don't see this at all. I have never, as I say, known a US president to be treated like this. That has to change as well. Look, let me end on some good news. Europe is changing. Europe is coming back. And it's almost a good thing that the left have gone so insanely crazy. Because the more crazy they become, the more obvious it is that they're crazy. And people are seeing it. And this utter madness cannot continue. And the madder they get, the more people understand that this is madness. And all over Europe, a shift is happening. It really is happening. I hope, for example, in France, which is such a key country to save. We need to save France. It is in a terrible, terrible mess. And what you won't hear or read in the papers either about France is the Yellow Vest protesters. Are you familiar with them? Yeah. Every weekend, they are out protesting against Macron's government. And every weekend, there is extreme violence committed against them. and there is nothing being said or done about it. The press is not reporting on this. These are people who are peacefully protesting in France, of all places, and they are being beaten and abused by police. Nobody is doing anything about it. You won't hear about it in the press. But you will have Macron going to the French Parliament asking to pass laws in which protesters are referred to as troublemakers. That's a dangerous, dark development. They are protesting against his government. He is trying to pass laws describing them as troublemakers, therefore stopping the right to protest in France. Germany, people go to jail for Facebook posts. People go to jail for criticising Angela Merkel's open border policy. That's not a free society. That's not a free country. And don't even get me started on Sweden. Sweden is... Everyone laughs. Everyone laughs when you say Sweden. It's yeah, okay, yeah, we get it. Yeah, Sweden. It's insane asylum. But even in Sweden, things are turning around. The Sweden Democrats are turning things around. They are popular. People are waking up to this. The Alternative for Deutschland is now a credible force in Germany. Marine Le Pen will be back in France. I can assure you she will be back. And she's going to win this time. But in the poor old UK, we unfortunately for the moment are stuck with Labour and the Conservatives. But I intend to change all of that. And change all of that we will. It's not quite as difficult, it's not quite as two-party state in the UK as it is in the US. We do have other parties with seats in Parliament. There's only two big ones capable of forming a government, but we do have other parties in Parliament. It's not completely just those two. So there is always hope that these things can change and smaller parties do break through. But I have made a solemn promise to myself, and I've made a solemn promise to my party, and that is that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We are not going to backpedal. We are not going to bow down. We are not going to apologise. We are not going to alter our language so that we are no longer telling the hard truth. In other words, I am never going to call it Islamism. I will always call it Islam. I will always call the left psychotic, evil, rotten to the core individuals who are full of hate and misery and self-hatred, in fact. You can see it. These are people with serious social problems. And there they are, out on the street, attacking people with weapons and all sorts, and then being portrayed by the press as offenders or defenders of the oppressed. Give me a break. These people are rotten. It is evil. They are lying and lying and lying, and they know they're lying. They destroy people's livelihoods. They destroy people's lives purely for disagreeing with them politically. They are rotten, and they cannot win. They can't win because they have nothing but lies and deceit and, yes, evil. I will call it that. That is what it is. We have to and will defeat it. I still believe in the power of truth. I still believe in the power of good, decent, honourable, patriotic people. And we are still good, decent, honourable, patriotic people. And we can and will turn this evil around and bring sanity back to our societies. If you can help us in any way, please do understand, first of all, how serious this is, and understand also that America is on the same path as Europe. We must help each other. If you can help us, offer any support, please, please do. But thank you for coming along this evening, and I will take questions. Are we going to have a break?
45 minutes of questions, easy.
Okay.
Stand up, come on, stand up.
With no notes. With no notes.
No,
Okay.
Over here. Thank you very much. This was really amazingly enlightening about the UK. It's a country that we certainly can appreciate. We've learned, we inherited a great deal of our government ideas from the UK. Tell me, what about Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland and Ireland itself? Do they have the same kinds of problems, or do they see it the same way? And what about the Parliament in England? The Parliament, they must know what's going on, but they can't pass laws or insist that certain things be done?
Kind of like ours.
Very, very good question. Okay, let me start with Scotland. Scotland is probably, no, it's not the worst. I mean, it's hard to pick a worst actually out of them. They're all pretty bad. But Scotland is run by a party called the Scottish National Party, led by a dreadful, dreadful individual named Nicola Sturgeon, who is the First Minister of Scotland. They pretend to be nationalists. They are not nationalists. They want independence from the United Kingdom, but they want to stay in the European Union. So they want nothing resembling independence at all. It's a sham. They are also mass immigration, dedicated to mass immigration. The Scottish National Party have promoted Sharia. It has several senior figures who are pro-Sharia and involved in Islamic extremist groups. It's one of the worst parties in the country, and it has about 30-odd seats in the national UK Parliament, as well as dominating the Scottish Parliament. So Scotland, pretty bad. And they're extreme left. Scotland is governed by the extreme left. I keep being told that the Scottish people are sick and tired of the Scottish National Party. Sadly, that doesn't yet reflect itself at the ballot box. But I suspect that's largely or partly because they've no one else to vote for. And I think that's a huge problem. And that's one of the reasons why I started a political party, is because I constantly tell people, go out and vote differently. They can't if there's no one to vote for. So Scotland, pretty bad. Wales, equally so. Wales is, what do they call it? A refugee centre? So they basically want the country to be one big refugee centre.
Sanctuary?
A sanctuary country. I think that's actually what they call it, sanctuary country. Certainly its capital, Cardiff, is called by its government a sanctuary city. Now, its own people, and the same goes in Scotland, and in Nicola Sturgeon's own constituency, poverty is among the highest poverty levels in Scotland. And yet, rather than deal with the highest poverty levels in Scotland, in her own constituency, she wants to open up Scotland to half the world and let these refugees come so that she can make all these virtue signalling points about, look at me, look how generous I am. Yes, my own people are living in squalor, but look how nice I am to bring half the world into Scotland. This is what they do. And Wales is exactly the same.
Pelosi, that's our Pelosi.
It's a Western problem. This is repeated. It's all over Western Europe. It's the US. It's Canada. God help Canada. I mean, even Canada makes the UK look good. It's really quite shocking. And it's Australia. So it's the entire Western world. And there's a reason for that. That's not a coincidence. It's because they are democratic, capitalist, and I'm sorry to bring it up, I know it's controversial, but white majority. We have anti-white hatred mainstreamed all over the world, from the United Nations down to the local government council who collects your bins. There is anti-white hatred. It is relentless, and that's one of the reasons why the Western world is under this much pressure. They don't want white majority countries, they don't want capitalist countries, and they're going to bring them down through chaos by mass third world immigration. So Scotland is a left-wing nightmare. Wales is, I'll get to Ireland, Wales is just as bad. And Ireland is what I call the Palestinian flag of Europe. That's what I call Ireland. And you get you know what Palestinian flag means. You know you're dealing with the absolute loony left. Ireland is the Palestinian flag of Europe. It intends to bring in 1 million, it's probably going to be a lot more than 1 million by 2040. Remember, this is a country of 4.5 million. They want 1 million immigrants by 2040. It's called Project 2040. They sell it as some big exciting thing. And there have been scandals about governments paying newspapers money to promote this stuff, to positively promote this, to make sure that the Irish people only have a positive view of the fact that they are getting 1 million people, and it will be all from the third world. It will be all benefit dependency. I'm telling you, this will not be vibrant young people looking for work, and no, this will be benefit dependence from the third world. 1 million of them into a country of 4.5 million. It won't stop at that, and I, depressingly, because I was born in Ireland, depressingly have to say that I think that the Irish will be a minority in Ireland in my lifetime. Easily. It's just far too small a country to handle this kind of immigration. Northern Ireland, same. It's across the board. It's uniform. It's every Western country. Northern Ireland is the same. On both sides of the divide in Northern Ireland, so you've got Sinn Féin on one side, DUP on the other. Guess what? Guess what they have in common? They both happy with mass immigration, and they both love Islam. They go to the mosques, and they shake the hands of the imams, and they make sure they have these nice photos taken with the imams. This happens as routine. Politicians love going to the mosque to get their photo taken with the imam. And let me tell you one of the most disgusting of these. The day after the Manchester bombing, the day after children at a concert were blown to bits by jihadis, the very next day, Manchester's chief of police was in a mosque holding up a Quran and getting his photograph, a nice smiley photograph, taken with the Quran and the local imam the very next day. And every time something happens regarding Islam, every time we are attacked by Muslims, the priority of the police is to go and protect the mosques. Always. It's always the way. When any terror attack that has been perpetrated against the British people, the response of the police is to go to the mosques and protect the mosques. They want to make sure that Muslims feel safe. What about us? We're the ones who've just been attacked. Why are you going out making sure the Muslims feel safe? But what also is interesting is that when Muslims are attacked, as in Christchurch, for example, the priority is again to go out and protect the mosques. So no matter what happens, no matter who protects who, the priorities are 1, get the police down to the mosques now to make sure nobody attacks them, and 2, get out all the imams to tell us all about how peaceful Islam is, and they will always come out with this verse. You know the verse. If you kill one person, it's like you've killed all of mankind. If you save one person, you save all of mankind. Are you familiar with this verse from the Quran? They say it all the time. It's completely false. They've left out the middle bit. And the middle bit which says, unless you cause mischief in the land. And guess what causing mischief is? Not obeying Sharia. It is so blatant that they are reading the Quran to us and leaving out an entire sentence. The sentence that is the most relevant. This is what happens every time something goes wrong. Defend Islam, defend the mosques, every single time. Scandalous. And it's the same across the board.
So I have 2 questions. The first, when you started this party, and clearly you couldn't have gotten press or good press, even the social media, after a while, I think taken down.
I've been kicked off.
So like, how did you pull it off, which is,
What's it called?
How did you get the word out?
yeah, how did you do that? So that was one thing. And kind of what we're talking about today, I'm listening to all this stuff about all these countries and who's bringing these people in. Somebody's going to be getting paid off. It can't just be because they want to look good in a photograph. There's something else going on. So any thoughts you have on that?
How did we do it? Good old-fashioned politics. You know, political parties used to campaign before the internet. They did.
Yes, that's true.
And that's what we're doing. I have personally been kicked off Twitter, and the party's Twitter account has also been closed down. So we go out and we knock on doors. That's what we do. We put leaflets through letterboxes. That's what we do. We can't hold public meetings because the police get venues shut down. And I'm not kidding about that either. We will hire a venue for an event. The police will call the venue and say, do you know who these people are? Do you really want to host them? And their venue is cancelled. So we're going to try again. You've just got to keep trying. But we can't hold public meetings. So yeah, we knock on doors. We stand in elections. So if there's a local election, local by-election, we stand in it. That gives us a platform. It gives us a reason to knock on doors. It gives us a reason to hand out leaflets. And it's working. People are voting for us. And in fairly decent numbers. We've won a few seats so far. And we're doing really well. We're beating long-established parties. So just by old-fashioned politics. And the press is so distrusted that whenever they go after me, it's almost like a thank you. Thanks for that. Because the people know what liars they are. And that, you know what, there's lots of reasons to love Donald Trump. And I mean that. There are so many reasons to love Donald Trump. And one of them, and his presidency would have been worth it alone just for this. The way he stands up to the media. The way he called out fake news. It was just beautiful, beautiful. He changed how the world sees the mainstream media. And for that, I will always be grateful to him. So the world no longer trusts the media. So every time they go after us, it's a few more supporters, thanks very much. They know, people know. So yeah, with good old-fashioned politics. What else is behind it? I don't think there is any one thing behind it. It's a perfect storm. There are several vested interests in this, all going on at once. There are a lot of people getting rich from cheap labour, and we know that wages and conditions of working class people have reduced because, hey, economics 101, oversupply of labour, reduction of wages. This is simple stuff. So they're getting cheap labour. Big business is getting cheap labour. The Labour Party is importing voters. Which it loves, and they make sure very, very quickly that these people are registered to vote immediately. I don't believe that this should be allowed in any way. They should not actually, you're not actually by law supposed to be voting in a general election unless you are a British citizen. But as with all laws in the UK, it means nothing. People just vote anyway, and polling cards are handed out willy-nilly. We've got so much electoral fraud going on as well. And that's something that our manifesto this year is really going to go after. You'll have 20 people in the same house, all of them registered to vote. All of them with postal votes. I mean, we know it's going on. And so anyway, that's, as an aside, that's something that we have to deal with. But Labour is importing voters. Big business is importing cheap labour. The psychotic social misfits of Antifa get to have something to do. And I'm not kidding. They love this. They love being involved in all this. They love, it's almost like the Batman light going into the sky, isn't it? Virtue signalling. Look at me. Look how lovely I am. Look how non-racist I am. I'm campaigning to bring half the world to Britain. I'm just wonderful. They love it. It's their identity. It's who they are. And also, the other section of the left, which genuinely sees immigration as a key to bringing down capitalism, there's several reasons for it. Lots of vested interests, lots of people want this to happen. I don't think it's any one thing. But of course, money is always involved. People are getting rich from this. But there are other reasons for it as well. And it's just the perfect storm.
Yeah, I just want to make a statement, then I have a question. I'm sure you know that the transgender, this whole transgender, is huge money in transgender. Yes. And it's all a fraud.
Yes,
okay? It's a money grab. And that young families are encouraged to give their children hormone shots, at 7 or 8 years old.
Puberty blockers.
Puberty, right. But the guess who gives them the blockers? Planned Parenthood. Yeah, Planned Parenthood. They're the ones that give it. I mean, nobody really knows that, but it's important. Don't forget it. So my question is, among all of this turmoil, what about anti-Semitism?
Gosh. Anti-Semitism is growing across Europe and in Britain. It's a funny thing, you'll hear all this about how Jews rule the world, and I think to myself, my God, They are sitting ducks. They can't even do anything about a spectacularly, openly anti-Semitic Labour Party. And yet apparently they rule the world. The Labour Party is anti-Semitic for several reasons. One, because it's the extreme left, and the extreme left is staunchly anti-Israel, which translates into anti-Semitism. But also because Labour has become a vehicle for jihadis. And it is swimming in extreme, in Muslims. It's got Muslim councillors, Muslim mayors all over the country, reeking of anti-Semitism, absolutely reeking of it. And they won't do it. Jeremy Corbyn, himself an anti-Semite, very much so, the leader of the Labour Party, very much so an anti-Semite himself. He will do nothing about this, A, because of what I've just said, but B, because there are so many more Muslims than there are Jews. And he wants the Muslim vote. And he doesn't care about the Jewish vote. So he will entertain growing anti-Semitism. A few years ago, I think it was 2015, now this is a shocking statistic, but it'll give you an indication of what's happening in Europe. 2015, more than 10,000 Jews left France alone because of anti-Semitic attacks by Muslim immigrants. Now, take that in, and it's only getting worse and worse and worse. And anti-Semitism is mainstreaming now. The Tories say nothing. The Tories are not going to fight back. Partly, I think, because they too are afraid of a Muslim backlash. Islam and Muslims are completely transforming our society in so many different ways. They're a danger to women, they're a danger to Jews, they're a danger to children, they're a danger to law and order, they're a danger to good old-fashioned decency. And Jews are very much at the top of the list of victims of this. So that is a staggering figure, 10,000 from France alone, left for Israel because of anti-Semitic attacks. There are Jewish people being murdered around Europe as well by Muslims, and it's not making the press. There are people being murdered around Europe, and it's not making the press. So anti-Semitism is growing. It's huge. I see it. I see it. If I make a video about Islam, for example, and stick it out on YouTube, with the comments afterwards, there'll be so many people saying, when are you going to say it's the Jews, Anne-Marie? When are you going to wake up? This has all been... And I think, what? You don't engage with this, but you've got to say to yourself, right, okay, tell me why it's the Jews. It's the Jews. So it's okay, whatever, tell me why. How have you come to that conclusion? And usually what you'll get is, have you ever heard of Barbara Lerner Specter? This is a Jewish woman, Swedish Jewish woman, and she made a video. So this is one individual making her own video saying that Jews were going to multiculturalize Europe. That's it. That's it. That's their evidence. It's insane. It is the usual old stuff. Let's look around for someone to blame. The country is going to hell in a handcart. Who can we blame? Let's blame somebody, because it's not my fault. Well, who's actually to blame ultimately, and I hate to say this, but it's true, who's ultimately to blame for all this is us. Because we keep bloody voting for them. That's who's to blame. But rather than any self-reflection, rather than look at ourselves as a society and say, why are we still voting for these crooks time and time and time again, rather than look in the mirror and say, this is us doing this. We did this. We did this because we were too complacent and too well off almost, too comfortable, to bother to read anything outside the main, to get our news from anyone but the BBC. And then we'll go out and vote in accordance with what the BBC tells us, which is vote for Labour or the Conservatives. Look, they don't want to look in the mirror and realise that this is our own fault for voting for them. Instead, they're going to find someone else to blame. And history shows us who is at the top of the list to blame is always Jews. I have no idea why, but it is. And this darkness is showing itself again. And for a combination of reasons. Well, let me give you one last example on this. The Nazis burned down a synagogue in Wuppertal, Germany in 1938. That same synagogue was burned down by Muslims in 2015. Now that is darkness descending over Europe again. And we have got to fight it. We have got to fight it. And part of the reason why I want to go to synagogues and I want to say to British Jews, come on, wake up, Wake up. But they don't trust me. And they don't trust me because the newspapers keep telling them I'm far right and that I'm a Nazi. So I don't blame them for not trusting me. But something's got to change here as well. Something's got to give. Jews all over Europe are going to have to realise and wake up and realise that they are top of the target list, not only for Muslims, but for the real far right, who will jump up and down at any opportunity to blame Jews. So in answer to your question, anti-Semitism is rife and growing, and it is a sign of darkness descending over Europe again.
Sadiq Khan,
Oh dear, oh dear.
the mayor of London.
What did he say?
Oh,
I figure she should comment on Sadiq Khan, the mayor of London.
nightmare.
Oh,
Do you want to sit down? We're worried about you standing up so long. Would you like to sit down?
she has to sit there.
Why are you worried about me? Do I look like I'm about to keel over?
You don't have to, but I mean, I just want you to feel free to sit
Oh,
down.
that's okay. That's okay. Thank you, though. Thank you for the concern. I appreciate that. Sadiq Khan, gosh, one of the worst politicians in the country, one of the most hated politicians in the country. A complete and utter failure as Mayor of London. A complete and utter failure. And completely unwilling to entertain the idea that the unprecedented violence in London, and London's an old city, unprecedented violence in London couldn't remotely be anything to do with him. You'll see him on the television, so it's got nothing to do with me. I don't, you know, this is, I can't, what do you expect? What do you want me to do about it? This is sort of attitude he's got. And he spends his time attacking Donald Trump, which is his favourite hobby. And if he's not attacking Donald Trump, he's going on about climate change or one of these trendy lefty causes that has nothing to do with him. But again, it's all about shining that light into the sky, isn't it? The virtue signal. Look at me. Look how wonderful I am. I'm doing nothing at all about my actual job. Kids are killing each other in the street on a daily basis. That's got nothing to do with me. I'm too busy attacking the US president and banging on about climate change. That's Sadiq Khan. You know what? Depressingly, he might be elected again. And he might be elected again because it'd be racist not to elect him. And I'll tell you where that comes from. When he was running for Mayor of London, he was the Conservative candidate was Zach Goldsmith. And Zach Goldsmith quite rightly questioned Sadiq Khan's links to jihadis. And Sadiq Khan has a long history of friendships with known jihadis. And Zach Goldsmith questioned this, and David Cameron supported him in questioning this, and David Cameron was called a racist in Parliament. The left absolutely went for Zach Goldsmith over this. They tore him to shreds. Not one of them questioned what he was actually pointing out about Sadiq Khan. There was no questioning that at all. There was no investigation into his links with jihadis and with known extremists. None of that. The press wasn't interested in that. They were going to call Zach Goldsmith a racist. And then if you didn't vote for Sadiq Khan, you were also a racist. And that's kind of how it works. You're not allowed to ask questions of a Muslim in office. Not allowed to question them at all. If you do, it's racist. In summary, he's utterly appalling, but he's just one of many.
Yeah. We had that problem with Michelle Bachmann questioning Huma Abedin,
Oh.
getting on her out of Congress. But he may be doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, you know.
Hi.
My question is about the monarchy. Don't they see what's happening and they eventually will be coming after them?
Oh gosh. That's such an interesting question. I'm going to give you a really depressing answer about that. I think the monarchy is getting ready. I really do. And people are going to think I'm crazy, that I'm some crazy conspiracy theorist. I actually think the monarchy is preparing for Islam. It couldn't bow down any further to Islam than it is. The entire royal family, minus the Queen, and the Queen is probably the only royal that the country respects. And I know that I respect her. I don't think I know anyone, even the most ardent Republicans, who doesn't respect the Queen. But I think respect for the monarchy will end when she goes. I'm dreading I'm dreading it when she does go. But I think respect for the monarchy will be gone after that, because next in line is Charles. Now, Charles took a recent Easter message to talk about Muhammad. And he spent the entire Easter message talking about how wonderful Muhammad was. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. You have the generation after him. Oh, and by the way, the monarch is officially the defender of the faith, meaning the defender of the Church of England, the Christian established church in England. Charles is going to change that to defender of faiths. So he wants to elevate all the other religions up to the same status as the Christian Church of England. So that's who's coming after the Queen. That's who's coming next. The Queen doesn't say anything about anything, which we're kind of used to. She's supposed to not make her political views known. But legally, constitutionally, she's still in charge of that country. And if there was ever a time for her to stick her nose into it, but it wouldn't really be sticking her nose in. If there was ever a time for the Queen to break convention and say something, now is time. Now is the time. But it isn't going to happen. And after her, it's just going to get worse, because Charles is absolutely in the pocket of Islam. And the generation after him, William, I don't think William is quite as bad as Harry in terms of political correctness, but they are politically correct. And I remember actually when Harry and Meghan Markle were not long married, they went to some event in London, and they were talking about how there was 25, 26 different nationalities in this room that she was at. And she made this speech, this is Meghan Markle, and she made this speech focusing on how wonderful it was to have 26 different nationalities in the room. Now, I'm not saying it's not, but why is it wonderful? What's so wonderful about it? Why, there's this given that the fewer Brits in the room, the better. And that's what it really means. So if you have all this diversity, it means you have fewer Brits. And isn't that great? There's only like one Brit in this room. Let's celebrate. That's what we're getting. So that's the younger generation of royals. So it's not good news. When the Queen goes, that's it. But I mean, the Queen isn't a great deal of help as it is anyway.
Maybe she'll surprise us.
Oh, it would be a huge surprise.
You have to get to her.
Everybody's aware, I mentioned earlier that Jeffrey Epstein was suicided,
Oh, yeah.
probably protecting the Clintons and others like him. Is there any connection, is this this sex slave trade, this sex trafficking is international, between these Muslim groups that are doing this, with the euphemism that they call the grooming gangs and all that? Is there any connection between them and like the stuff that's going on in the United States with whoever was connected with this cartel?
I don't think so, to be honest. I wouldn't have thought so. I don't think it's that sophisticated. I don't think the Muslim grooming gangs are a sophisticated network.
There's a lot of money to be made.
Well, yes, but I may be wrong, but I don't think so. I don't think they're that sophisticated. I think this is opportunism. I think they prey on these girls. These girls have a broken home life. They don't have much of a home life. They don't have anyone really looking after them. Many of them are in the care of the local authority. And they are exploited. And I think it's opportunism. They see these girls with no one to protect them, no one to look after them. And they groom them and then traffic them around the country to be raped. I don't think it's a very sophisticated thing. I don't think millions are being made on it. I don't think so, is my opinion. I don't think they're connected. I don't think it's a big, sophisticated international network. I really don't.
And they're getting away with this simply because of political correctness, not because they're paying off the police authority.
Oh no, I wouldn't know. The British police are terrified to go after them. And that has to be understood as well. I think that the British state has accepted, and quite rightly, that if they do go after these men, if they do apply the law, if they do enforce the law, then Muslims will react. You will have riots in the street. You will have police attacked. You will have, it will be sort of like this Black Lives Matter stuff, where they get, someone, a black criminal is, and you have riots in the streets in retaliation. They know that's what's going to happen. So it's easier to let the children be raped than to deal with that backlash. That is what it's about. But also, they are so petrified of being called racists. that, and I can't emphasize enough how serious that aspect of it is. If you accuse a police officer of racism, they are done. They're done. Their career's over. That's it.
That's what's going on here, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's done. They're done. And police, they have mortgages to pay, and they have children to raise, and they know that even if they did lose their job on a matter of principle, it wouldn't make any difference. It won't change anything. So they'll have lost the roof over their children's head for nothing. So no one's going to do it. So they're terrified. And Muslims have worked this out. They know perfectly well. And you have, again, in the J report that I described earlier, several instances of people telling the police, I'll accuse you of racism if you touch me. They do, and the police are terrified and walk away. It's not as sophisticated as that. It's actually low-level, opportunistic crime that the police are too afraid to touch. It's nothing more glamorous than that. That's what it is. Low-level, rotten, backstreet, back alley rape of vulnerable girls, and the police are just too afraid of racism accusations to do anything. It's no more sophisticated than that. Aye.
If the government is protecting the Islamists, and the police are protecting the Islamists, the Muslims, 6 and 1/2 dozen of others sometimes, and the courts are protecting them, and the media is protecting them, why are you optimistic?
Because the people know better. Because people know better. Look, I said earlier that a statistic was published this week that 50% of British people think Islam is a threat to our way of life. Now, what you've just said is absolutely true. The courts are protecting them, the police are protecting them, the media is protecting them, the politicians are protecting them. And even with all of that, 50% of British people know it's a threat to our way of life. That's why I'm optimistic.
Just like Trump.
Just like Trump, I was just gonna say that.
They're the minority.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Two things, I'm sorry, you may have said this in the beginning, but I didn't hear it, or I didn't get it. What is the name of your party? One question, and then when you say if you can help, I mean, that you welcome it, I mean, is there a website or something where you put support online? And then my other thing is about Prince Charles. I mean, what you're saying to us, we understand your words and we are internalizing what you're saying. And, and we're not English, we're not British subjects. I mean, why is there no one who has said this to him? And why doesn't he get it? Why doesn't Prince Charles get it? I mean, we get it, why doesn't he get it? I don't understand that.
Well, for the same reason that a lot of them don't get it. There's a variety of reasons they don't get it. They're too stupid, and I don't use that word as an insult or to make a joke or anything. I've said many times stupidity is what will kill us in the end, because they're stupid. They're incapable of understanding simple concepts, and I'm serious. You can see it in people's eyes. You get this extreme leftist, and you try and have a conversation, you can see in their eyes that they're just blank. They just don't get it. The simplest of things, they don't get it. So stupidity is part of it. Willful ignorance is part of it. They really believe virtue signaling is a very serious part of it. And honestly, the more cynical side of me, perhaps Charles knows which side his bread is buttered on. And if he still wants to be a monarch, if he still wants a royal family, he's going to have to start paying homage to the right people. Oh, and in answer to your first question, For Britain is the name of the party. And the forbritain.uk is our website. Please do check us out, and please do help any way you can. Thank you. And also, I heard, when you asked about Prince Charles, I heard the words, he's rotten. Yeah, that too. Bye.
Since you said they throw ballots out just to willy-nilly, please feel free to send boxes and boxes to us, and we'll mail out absentee ballots. We'd be more than happy.
I mean, it's really true. The electoral fraud is extraordinary. We've had, in Muslim areas, we've had police at polling stations. I think, actually, we ought to have international observers of our elections. I really do. And that's how bad it is. That is how bad the UK is. We ought to be having international monitoring. What's that?
Not from the UN.
Not from the UN.
But true, yeah. Oh, of course.
They're like the EU.
Goes without saying.
The UN is like the EU.
Hi.
Could you talk about the lack of Second Amendment and how that's affecting daily life over there?
Oh, God, that's an interesting one. It's just not something that we really think about. We're not used to guns, and it's not something that we think about. But I'll say I've started thinking about it a lot more, and I think people have started thinking about it a lot more, because you realise that you're actually defenceless, and that we rely on the state to defend us. And what do we do when we need defending from the state? And that's a question that none of us can really answer. It's an interesting. I don't think that the British people want we're not gun people. We're just not used to it. Even the police don't have guns, as you know. So we're just not used to guns. We're not a gun society. But I think it's certainly becoming more and more in my mind, and it must be in other people's as well, how vulnerable we are because of that. We do rely on the state to protect us. And we're not actually allowed to protect ourselves, much less with guns. We're not allowed mace, for example. You know, this little thing you spray in people's eyes. Not allowed that. There are lots of various different kind of knives you're not allowed to have, and you know, you're really not allowed to defend yourself. And there have been more than one occasion where people have gone to jail for defending themselves against attacks. It's becoming more and more part of our consciousness, I think. But it's not something guns, we're just not used to guns. It's not something we think about.
It's so stupid because as Americans, we all know the scene from Indiana Jones where the Muslim guy comes out with the knife and it's over. Yeah. But that's so American.
I know, that's why I was laughing.
But you have the knife.
That's exactly what went through my head.
So you see it's lingering. The cops should all have AK-47s walking around.
But you have the knife.
Well, in some places they do, in airports they do, in train stations they do.
People walking around with a Cuisinart kitchen knife in their pocket over there. I don't want to go to England. I don't want to get stabbed in the neck. We have a woman from Long Island that was just killed. They didn't even put it in the newspaper in Paris, walking out of her hotel.
Somebody's got the knives in London. Who's doing the knives?
Oh, somebody's got the guns in London as well. It's not a gun-free city. It's just that it's the criminals only who have them.
Police had guns. This shit would stop. All right? It's all the stabbings. It's all the knives. You can't fight against people with knives.
Look, we've had proposals where the police aren't even supposed. You know, politicians who tell the police not to chase muggers because you know we have this phenomenon in London at the moment where people on little mopeds driving around and grabbing things out of people's hands, handbags or phones or whatever it may be, and going off on them. And the police were told not to chase them because you might hurt them. You know, so you're telling me that the police are going to use guns? I mean, they're not even allowed to chase people in case they hurt them.
I'm just saying, I'm hearing everything, and I heard it all from Katie Hopkins. The whole thing is just like one big nightmare. But I got to tell you, it's a gun issue. Find a gun and it's on with a knife. He's gone. 1 second, it's over.
I have to say, I've said this a few times recently as well. If I lived in America, I'd be armed to the teeth. I really would. I would. I really would. And that's something I wouldn't have said a few years ago.
Right.
But I'll say it now.
One
I'm going to
more.
come to you because you've been putting your hand up, I think, for a while.
Two points in the question. The first one is, it sounds like, you know, the problem with the police there, it sounds like what's going on in America in our sanctuary cities, such as Chicago and Seattle and Portland and San Francisco and of course Manhattan now. And it's the politicians, because the police, if they know that the politicians do not have their backs, i.e. the mayor of all these towns, which it usually is, or in San Francisco, the mayor and Pelosi, if they know they don't have their backs, and we here, the police commissioners are told by the mayors and whoever's in charge, don't do that. and let the bad guys do this, and by the way, don't arrest them. So that's what's going on. Now, everyone knows, I'm sure you do too, what's just happened in New York City numerous times when the water was dumped on our policemen in New York, rookie policemen. And the reason why, it's not that they were afraid, it's that, well, they were afraid of their jobs. They were rookies and they didn't want to do the wrong thing. And that comes down from Mayor de Blasio, which is just ridiculous. And another point is, we have Democrat presidential candidates going around America just giving, everyone every day gets up to see who can give out more free stuff, which means more of our money to the people who are not working. And it's just absolutely terrible. And my other question is, that do you have, because I see this, and I know someone like you, I would think does, and everyone in your party, the hope is that you folks over there in England have someone like Donald Trump that you're grooming to come up and be run for mayor of London, run for mayor of Birmingham, run for parliament. We need more of those people, because it's the politicians who are guiding and coordinating all of that there and here. Except now we have Trump, and you're right. If we didn't have our President Trump right now, we'd be in. I mean, we are in a similar shape, but we would be a lot worse than we are now. And I believe he will win another term, because you said that just like here, where you are, that everyone's realizing what's going on. Even I hear the chatter with Democrats and other minor party people here that they know their own people are crazy. And I say to them, listen, you know what? I'm upset that you hate our president, especially when you demean the president's office and the president, just like all the presidential candidates do here, which is, it's totally despicable, absolutely despicable what they do to our president here and what they do to him in London. And our hope is only that a bunch of the people on the left in the voting, no matter what they say, and I say, listen, you want to hate our president? Be my guest. But you know what? Because you're free to do that. Free speech, free opinion, that's America. But when you get in that voting booth, you better vote for Mr. Trump and the Republicans, because otherwise your kids are in grave danger.
That's right.
Yes, they are. On your point about the politicians not having the police's back, that's absolutely key. And that's why they're so scared. Because if they had gone after these rape gangs, for example, and these rape gangs had accused them of racism, whose side do you think the politicians would have been on? No one will defend the police. Their careers will be over, and no one will be on their side. And that's why they're so terrified. So it is absolutely crucial. The politicians are the key, and that's why I said ultimately it comes down to the people. The people have to change this ultimately by not voting for them. Stop voting for them. But in order to stop voting for them, they have to have someone else to vote for. And that's what I'm trying to do, trying to provide. They have to vote. They have to vote. It's not going to change.
Which color do you want? Will you be able to wear one in England?
I'll definitely get a little bit of abuse.
It goes with your outfit.
I have 7 of these left. They're $15 each, and that's all I have. If you're interested, let me know. And we're giving one to her as a guest. I thought it would be a fun thing for you to take with you.
Who's going to take a picture?
I'll take the 2 cameras.
I'll take